Welcome into Husker247 Daily. I'm Michael Bruntz, joined by Brian Christopherson. It's Thursday. The portal window rolls on. Nebraska picks up another commitment on Thursday around lunchtime from UCLA. Edge, defensive end, Anthony Jones. Brian, what do you make of this one?
Well, you could definitely say he's an experienced Big Ten defender. This is his fifth school in 5 years, and I'm not saying that with snark. It's just the way it is these days. But he played 480, 490 snaps last year at UCLA. He was one of their better pass rushers. He has 3.5 sacks total in his career, 6.5 TFLs. So he's just a guy who's been around a lot and he has a good frame at 6'5". 265, knows what Big Ten football is all about. Nebraska obviously got to look at him in person this last season. And, they've done their film study on him. And he was one of the first guys they brought in, too. It wasn't like the first day, but it was, I think, Monday when he made his visit, like 3 days after the portal opened. And so, as we've said on these previous podcasts, I pay close attention to that. Like, who are those guys who are in those first few days? It's obviously someone through film and sort of studying like what this guy's about, how he can fit in Rob Orch's scheme, what Roy Manning in this case probably thinks about him. It all was appealing. And you do have to say, like, with that 5 schools in 5 years, they're all like powerful programs, like they're all good programs that have seen something in Anthony Jones. And he's gotten stuff done at each stop. He's progressed each year, and last year was his best season yet. So you're hoping now he's one of those college players who, like, in that final year, especially as you're trying to go to the NFL, just takes off to another level.
It's interesting. One of his highlights from UCLA was just an absolutely crushing sack of Anthony Calandria. Oddly enough, like, he kind of comes around the edge and just absolutely blasts him. So there's that familiarity and just really just kind of weird confluence of circumstances there. Obviously, defensive line's gotten a lot of attention, and rightfully so, coming out of that bowl game and just kind of the way the year progressed. There's still no defensive line coach announced by Nebraska yet. But this is the first defensive line ad of what I expect to be multiple more ads across the portal cycle here as Nebraska kind of gets into the second half of things. But what do you kind of see ahead for Nebraska? And, we've seen Nebraska at least start to be linked a little bit more to, at least publicly, to some guys that JUCO guys, which we can get into.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you kind of see playing out over the next few days here as it relates to Nebraska and the defensive line? Because that's got to be like the priority.
Yeah, it has to be, because I think right now people look at it with 8 commits and they're like, I kind of like where it's going. I love what they've done at linebacker. There's kind of some juice around Calandria and just like what that's going to be like, that experience. But the D line is that spot where it's like, oh man, that you worry a little bit. Like, you need to beef that up, probably add a couple more defensive tackles. And the situation is, in the portal right now, everybody across the country is trying to do the same thing. Anybody with money, Texas Tech, sort of got in the way of maybe some of the guys Nebraska was going after. They obviously have a ton of money to play with, but Nebraska does have an interesting guy who could make it on a campus from Iowa Western, and that's sort of exciting. In Andy Berberija, who had just a huge season. And you wrote a little bit about it last night, Bruntz, at Iowa Western. They had 12 sacks and 18.5 tackles. And I know there have been Husker fans who've been clamoring to get into that Iowa Western pipeline. Well, here's an opportunity that would really fit a need if this hit. But he is visiting Clemson first, maybe Nebraska on Saturday. That's the hope.
Yeah, kind of an interesting story with him. Actually signed with Kansas State in early December. He's a native of Chicago, and obviously the coaching change down there was released from that letter of intent and has kind of really blown up over the last couple of weeks, and rightfully so. I mean, he had a great year at Iowa Western. That's a school that produces annually Power 4 defensive linemen. You mentioned the Clemson visit. We're expecting the Nebraska visit later this weekend. If he gets past that Clemson visit, Chicago native that knows Trey Taylor from their earlier days, and I think for a guy, not just him but others down the road, I mean, I think you can look at the opportunity at Nebraska, just kind of given the way that last year went, and they should be able to sell that, but. Beyond Nebraska and Clemson, Penn State kind of came in with an offer, Michigan State, Arkansas. You've seen a lot of programs that went through coaching changes that are trying to add depth pieces along the defensive line, try to get on him as well. But, it's at least, I think, a positive to see Nebraska dipping into Iowa Western a little bit. You do kind of wonder, too, if like Dave Tollefson and his connections at Iowa Western and having been around the program a little bit, during the bowl practices, if that maybe kind of helped shake things loose a little bit there as well. But, I think without a doubt, you're looking at defensive line having to be more of a priority over the back half of the portal area here. And we're starting to see too, I mean, you kind of had this first wave of guys enter the portal. I think you're starting to see kind of a second wave as well enter here. But, Nebraska's got to get some work done there. And also, you just kind of have this, the fact that they don't have a publicly announced defensive line coach there yet either. I mean, I think that's a little bit of a concern as you're kind of starting to try to piece together your roster for next season.
Yeah, and it's the second year they've kind of gone through that. I mean, with Terry Braden last year, it was the same situation where he was, with the Chiefs all the way through that playoff run into the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And so, that's difficult, I think. I know you can obviously got the DC there and Roy Manning as the edge coaches, but it would probably be useful to have that guy in place right now. What else interests you, Bruntz? I mean, everybody always asks about the running backs. We heard mention of, one guy to just keep an eye on this morning. And, in Minnesota running back who went in the portal, Fame Ijiboy, and I hope I said the last name right, but Fame had a pretty, decent redshirt freshman season at Minnesota. He carried it, I think, 97 times. It was like 450 yards. He had a 100-plus yard game against Michigan State in a win, kind of a powerful back. PJ Fleck's been good at finding, good running backs, too, out of high school and all sorts of things. So you kind of give some credit to that as you look at a player like him. So he's a name to just monitor. He's been on visits to Virginia and one other program escaping me right now, but he'd be one to keep an eye on. And then, of course, there's going to be just that talk that's in the air, and it's just not going to go away, and that's fine. There's probably a reason for it with Marty Brown, who's an Omaha native, who's still playing in the college football playoffs with Miami. And if Nebraska could have a shot at him, like if the money was right and maybe the opportunity for more carries than a year ago when that wasn't as clear. So those are like the names that I would say right now that are of interest to me. Anything else jumping out to you?
Well, it's interesting that you haven't really seen you haven't seen much movement from Nebraska's running back room. Like, Emmett Johnson's out the door, obviously. Kenneth Williams hit the transfer portal today. Is kind of, obviously he's made his name as a kick returner, but was part of that running back room. I think he was fourth on the depth chart for the bowl game. But it's still a crowded room. And probably need to add – you would like to add some production to that group, but it's interesting. It feels like some of the conversations that we've had with – the defensive line and also the running back room. I mean, those are two position groups that for the last couple of years during this time, we've had that conversation of like, are they going to add somebody? Are they not? How do they feel about things? But that's, I think you need to, you at least don't have the benefit last year that you had of having Emmett Johnson there. Like, and it felt like he was a little bit further along in things than maybe where Mosey and Mekhi Nelson are going into next season. He was a little bit more of a known, at least, given how last year kind of finished for him. So I think that position group at least warrants monitoring a little bit more as we get further into January.
Yeah, it definitely does. We've been on the record. We have an open mind about what they have in that room and what they could produce, but add one more guy at least, and make that competition really hum. So we'll see that I think they need to do that. Obviously the D line is going to be the big focus to sort of round this out and make people feel good. I think they like a lot of the other parts that are developing. There's a good chance still, for a wide receiver, which hasn't been the main priority, but Quasi Gilmore's still out there. And as of the last few hours that I knew, I like Nebraska's possibilities there. Obviously, everything's fluid with the portal, but he's a name to keep in mind. But yeah, D tackle, probably another O lineman or two as this thing plays itself out. Running back, and then you got to keep in mind after these playoff games, there's going to be 2 teams that get eliminated this weekend, and there's going to be some guys from there that go in, and keep an eye on that because that could get interesting.
Yeah, and move pretty quickly too, I think.
Yeah.
As much as those guys are still playing, not tampering, but probably some conversations going on as well right there. So
no, they just keep their lips zipped the entire time until their season's done. None of that.
Just focusing on 2025 still. All right.
Yeah.
That's it for the Husker 247 Daily for Thursday. We'll be back with another episode. So keep it locked on Husker 247 for everything going through the portal.